Meine Damen und Herren, liebe Freunde der Dawkins Foundation, ich begrüße euch recht herzlich zu unserer heutigen Veranstaltung. 2018 haben wir an einer Übersetzung mitgewirkt, und zwar für ein Buch, was im Englischen The Moral Arc heißt und auf Deutsch dann erschienen ist 2018 der moralische Fortschritt. Dazu hatte ich den Autor dann zusammen mit Richard Dawkins in Berlin zu Gast in einem großen Event, worüber ich mich sehr gefreut habe. Und der Autor ist natürlich sehr umtriebig und hat in der Weile andere Bücher geschrieben. Und sein aktuelles Buch, welches letzten Monat erschienen ist, das heißt Conspiracy. Ich hoffe, man kann es lesen. Die Buchstaben sind ja ein bisschen verbunden. Why the Rational Believes the Irrational. Und ich freue mich sehr, ihn heute als Gast hier zu haben, und er wird uns hier sein Buch vorstellen. Ladies and Gentlemen, Michael Shermer.
Wow, thank you. Such a warm welcome on a cold night. Santa Barbara, it's like 75 degrees. If it was like this in LA, they just closed the city down. No. All right, so yes, thank you, Jorg and the Richard Dawkins Foundation. I haven't seen you guys in 4 years since the COVID shutdown. I wrote a book since then. So, the title, the cover design by the art director of the publisher put this together, but people have been pointing out that in addition to conspiracy, it also spells CIA and Soros, S-O-R-O-S. There's actually many conspiracies wrapped up in this, yeah. So, I think books should have a point. And so the question I'm trying to answer is, why would anybody believe conspiracy theories of any kind? And so just picture the guy walking across the Capitol Dome on January 6, 2021, carrying a Confederate flag, with all those other people in there with their cameras, taking selfies. I mean, what did they think was going to happen when they took over the government? Or whatever it is they thought they were going to do. What did they really believe? Or just take Edgar Welch, the young man who drove 3.5 hours to the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria in Washington, D.C., with an AR-15 style rifle to break up the secret satanic pedophile ring that Hillary was running in the basement of this pizzeria. I mean, did he really believe this? Yeah, he did. I mean, he said so. He had his cell phone camera while he's driving, leaving a message, I'm going in, because there's a crime going on there and nobody's doing anything about it. And I'm going to do something about it. He left this message for his daughters before this happened. So he got there, and you can imagine his surprise when they said, "Well, there's no basement here." He's like, "Well, where's the pedophile?" They're like, "What? This is pizza. People eating pizza, right?" And so obviously he believed, but some non-trivial percentage of Republicans mostly say they think there could be something to this. Can they possibly really believe this? In the same way that they would believe that it's cold outside, or that gravity is real, or the germ theory of disease is true, and so on. Would they believe it in the same way that that my money's in the bank and there's gas in my car and I'm going to take the kids to school and things are going to function? That kind of basic belief. And I don't think so. So I've been developing some theoretical ideas on what people mean by the word belief. What do you mean you believe something? Right? So we have empirical beliefs that scientists can analyze, run experiments, and present data and so on. But there's other kinds of beliefs, I think, mythical beliefs, psychological beliefs, political beliefs, that are religious beliefs, that are held in some different way. Like I make the point about the resurrection. Do you really think somebody was dead for 3 days and then was brought back to life? And well, a lot of Christians go, yeah, I absolutely believe that. And but I think a lot of people don't believe it in that way. It's just, I don't know, it's just what we believe. It's mythically true. I'm a Catholic, this is what I believe. I don't really think about it that much, right? I think most people don't think about it like that. So I think most conspiracy theories, the ones further out on the fringe, are more like those kind of mythic beliefs. They stand in for something else. So I've developed a kind of a 3-tiered theoretical model of these that I'll go over after I go through some of the details of of the more proximate explanation. So we could divide it all up into like proximate causes of why people believe conspiracy theories, and then ultimate, deeper causes. So the ultimate deeper ones are proxy conspiracies, tribal conspiracies, and constructive conspiracies. The proxy ones are conspiracy theories that stand for something else. Whether that one is true or not is kind of beside the point. It's this deeper idea. Tribal conspiracies are those that our tribe believes, our political party, our religion, our group, whatever. And I don't know if it's true or not, but my people say it is. So yeah, okay, I'll just tick the box to the survey taker. It's probably true. And then constructive conspiracies that I'll spend some time on. Constructive conspiracism is that enough conspiracy theories are true that it pays to believe most of them are true just in case. Right? So we'll come back to that. Now, the field of people that study conspiracy theories is relatively new from a professional, scholarly, scientific perspective. It was always treated as kind of a fringe topic by academics and social scientists when I was in college and as a young professor and so on. It was never taken seriously. Also by the media, these are just tinfoil hat wearing wackadoodles, weirdos living in their parents' basement that believe this stuff. That was actually kind of post-World War II attitudes toward conspiracy theories. Pre-World War II, conspiracy theories were much more mainstream and common. Pretty much everybody believed them. Everybody knew there were shenanigans going on and that corporations and government agencies were up to no good, because they were, right? And enough of them were true, and so on and so forth. I review hundreds of studies in the book. One, for example, by two political scientists that did a content analysis of all the letters to the editor of the New York Times for a century. Now, most of them are about whatever, because they're just random. But you take the ones that are about conspiracies, and then you do a content analysis of them, and you see no trends for a century. It's not like all of a sudden it spikes in the 60s or 70s. They've always been there. Now the subject of the conspiracies, who's up to no good, changes. It's the Mormons, it's the Jews, it's the Catholics, it's the capitalists, it's the communists, and those all change decade by decade. But the rate, of which these letters are coming in are pretty steady. And the surveys we have from the last maybe 50 years of what people believe about conspiracy theories are also pretty stable. The topics change, but the kind of background rate at which people say, yeah, I think there's probably something to that, they tell pollsters, has been pretty steady. And we know historically that people have always conspired to do things, and people have always thought somebody's up to no good, and here's what I think it is. All the way back, the most famous example of Rome burns and Nero is accused of either making it happen on purpose, my hop, or letting it happen on purpose, lie hop. That's language from 9/11 truthers, not Romans. But okay, so something bad happened. It was big. Why did it happen? Okay, well, who was in charge? That guy. All right, did he know it? It would happen? Did he let it happen? Did he make it happen? What happened after that? To what extent did they take advantage of this? And so on. Like after after Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, President Roosevelt was accused of, he knew the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor, or he was in on it, right? He let it happen on purpose, lie hop, made it happen on purpose, my hop. So here I introduce a new concept I call cow hop. Capitalized on what happened on purpose. This is what politicians do. They do the best they can to get what they want done when they're in office. You usually can't get much done when you have a country that has lots of checks and balances, and you have to get the approval of Congress or Parliament or whatever, and plenty of people don't like you, so they block you, and so on and so forth. And that was the case for Roosevelt. He wanted to get the United States into the Second World War to support Great Britain against those people from Germany. And he couldn't. Congressional support was not there. No more European entanglements after that disaster, First World War. Charles Lindbergh, famous aviator, was a big American firster. Let's keep American first. Don't worry about those other things. And they kind of ruled the day until Pearl Harbor. And then it's like, okay, now we're in. And so he capitalized on this thing that happened. And so this is the same thing with Bush, George W. Bush after 9/11. That's where those terms come from. And that's the whole 9/11 truther movement is grounded on this idea. He either let it happen on purpose, He knew it was coming. Okay, let's just not do anything. Told the jets to stand down while the planes flew into the building. Or he made it happen on purpose. He had operatives in there planning explosive devices and so on. In fact, none of that's true. But he did capitalize on what happened on purpose, right? He said, okay, we're going to invade Afghanistan. And hey, while we're over there, let's finish what my father started and finish the invasion of Iraq. And by the way, we have this Halliburton Corporation that's going to help rebuild Iraq, and my buddies get to make a lot of money. That's normal politics, right? That's kind of how things happen, which itself is a kind of conspiracy, sort of, but it's more realistic. It's not as, titillating, enticing as some of the more dramatic conspiracy theories. So that is some hints at, kind of the spectrum of conspiracy theories, how realistic they are. But more along the lines of, well, if something big happens, why did it happen? So here we see the proportionality bias, as it's called, that we want the cause of something to match the effect. So if you think about, again, to use a current example here, the Holocaust, one of the worst things that ever happened in human history, caused by what? By the Nazi regime, one of the worst political regimes in human history. There's kind of a balance. Oh yeah, that sort of makes sense. Imbalance would be, JFK assassinated, leader of the free world, most powerful person on earth, was killed by who? This Lee Harvey Oswald, this complete nobody. Jackie Kennedy herself called him this silly little communist, killed my husband. It's just like this nobody. Right? That just doesn't feel right. So we have to add elements to it. The CIA and the FBI and the KGB and the Mafia and the Cubans and the Russians and, okay, now it's all making sense. And if you watch Oliver Stone's films, either the drama film JFK or his now 4-hour documentary, and you can watch the extended version, which I think is 8 hours, everybody was in on it, right? Because it kind of feels more balanced. Or Princess Diana, cause of death, drunk driving, speeding, no seatbelt. Tens of thousands of people die on highways from those causes, right? But princesses are not supposed to die the way the rest of us regular people die, right? So there had to be someone, the MI5, MI6, the royal family, somebody was in on it, Prince Charles or Prince Philip, or so on and so on, or she faked her death, and she's still alive somewhere, and her and Dodi Fayed are living in South America with Elvis and Marilyn Monroe. And so that's another interesting study I talk about, a famous paper, a scholarly paper called Dead and Alive. The people who tick the box for Princess Diana was probably murdered are also more likely to tick the box that she faked her death. Okay, she can't be both dead and alive. You can't possibly believe those two things. Right, so it gets back to this, what do people mean when they say, yeah, I believe that? They can't possibly believe that. So when they say believe, they mean something else. Like, I don't trust any authority that tells me this is what it really happened. So they're really communicating a lack of trust in authorities of any kind, corporate, government, or whatever, media, mainstream media, and so on. Yeah, so so you start to kind of break down some of those specific things, like the proportionality bias. We know from research on, okay, so I'll just back up a little bit because it's kind of a folk physics thing. If you take a little stone and you kind of throw it like that, it just goes a little ways. But if you really put some effort into it, it goes really far. And so there's kind of a proportionality between the effort I put into something and the effect that it has, right? So then you take subjects and you ask them to roll, take 2 die, and try to roll a low number, like a 1 or 2 or 3. They'll go like that, like this. Now try to roll like a 10 or 11 or 12, and they'll go like this, right? So it's like that. Of course, that has no effect at all, but it's kind of that feeling like if I put more effort into it. Right? So again, it's like we have this folk physics of proportionality between cause and effect. So the bigger the event, and so the studies, they just make up conspiracy theories about some pandemic or a weather disaster, and then you kind of present it to subjects in different scenarios. To what extent was it really catastrophic or it wasn't so bad? The worse the event is, the more people that die and so on, the more subjects are likely to say, yeah, it was a conspiracy. Somebody was involved somehow. Now, you wouldn't think this would matter with weather events, but in fact, there's lots of conspiracy theories that governments can control the weather, by cloud seeding and things like this. or pandemics, of course, as you know, the lab leak hypothesis is still on the table. It's like maybe 50-50 with the zoonotic hypothesis, right? It's not exactly a conspiracy theory because no one's blaming the Chinese for doing it on purpose as a bioweapon that they released to kill people in their own country. No, it's more like just an accident. But still, that's the kind of thing we don't. And the Chinese government doesn't help themselves by being not very transparent, which makes us, suspicious of that sort of thing, right? Anyway, so those are some of the. Just go through some of the other psychological effects of why people believe conspiracy theories. Education does attenuate conspiracism a bit, not as much as you might think. Roughly speaking, on average, from like 40% to 20% of belief in conspiracy theories across the board. But here I'm comparing high school diploma to postgraduate degree. Okay, so that 20%, 1 out of 5 with a postgraduate degree believe conspiracy theories tells us, okay, there's something else going on here. It's not like it's just a matter of thinking rationally, critically, and then you won't believe it. So again, it's back to that, I think, this kind of constructive conspiracism. A lot of these are true, so maybe the smart thing is to believe some of them are true, right? Race is not a proxy for conspiracism in general, but it does predict which conspiracy theories are likely to be believed. In America, black Americans are more likely to think the CIA planted crack cocaine in inner city. There was some evidence for this for a while. It didn't quite pan out. Or that they invented AIDS to decimate the black populations. And this gets back to Tuskegee experiments in which these African Americans in Alabama who had syphilis were not given the treatment for syphilis in order to track them over decades to see what the effects would be. This was totally legal. Well, it's really illegal, but done under the radar, by secret, by government agencies. Right? It's pretty bad, right? So when African Americans today say they're a little vaccine hesitant about COVID-19, you kind of understand, oh yeah, I see why, right? Or white Americans are more likely to think, that the government's conspiring to take away our guns. They're building these FEMA camps. The Federal Emergency Management Agency builds these camps to put Americans that own guns. Well, Roosevelt built camps in the western United States to lock up Chinese for several years during World War II. Okay, so again, most of these things have a little element of truth to them. And, so you start to look at like political orientation, liberals, conservatives. None are more likely to believe conspiracies than the others, but which ones? So the meme here is conspiracy theories are for losers. That is, the losing party in an election is more likely to think that the other party did something. Some shenanigans, some vote tampering, something was going on there. Normally what happens is that they drop it after a few weeks or months and then concentrate on the next election. Or they launch an investigation, it turns up nothing. Right? The unusual one about Trump is that he's still promoting the theory. Right? He even thought there was a conspiracy theory to rig the 2016 election. And after he won, it's like, okay, now, according to the rule, you won, so you can stop with the conspiracy. Oh, no, because he had to beat Hillary in the general election, which he did by about 6 million votes, 3 million votes, I guess. Anyway, but the Democrats, when they thought Hillary was going to win, they thought, well, this is a fair election. And then the moment she lost, the Russian collusion. And then the Mueller report showed there was no Russian collusion. They manipulated social media, but that's different than manipulating the election and votes and so on. So it's pretty normal for political conspiracies to go be oriented against the other party, or that something was conspiring to hurt our party. Anxiety and lack of control. People that score high on external locus of control as opposed to internal locus of control. Internal locus of control, you tend to feel like you're in control of your life. You have agency. Bad things can't happen to you that much because you can do something about it. People opposite think bad things happen to me and this is why my life is as it is. So those people score higher in conspiracism. And people put in a situation of feeling anxious or out of control, like they'll have subjects write a little essay about something bad that happened in their life, or just imagine this terrible time in your life. And then they give them a little survey about conspiracy beliefs, and they score higher. And there's a whole bunch of those little tasks you can put people through, and then they find connect the dots in random patterns of kind of noise, like a degraded Xerox kind of copy that, I think I see something in there, like what I call patterning. So that's just this idea of, I'm out of control, so therefore something is more likely to happen to me. Somebody's behind the scenes, pulling the strings, that kind of thing. Right, so those are kind of proximate. There's not much difference on gender, except for which conspiracy theory that people point to. And again, I think that consistent background noise of almost everybody believes at least one conspiracy theory. Now, again, there's always limitations of self-report data in social science. You're just asking people, who knows what's going on in their heads, but that they tick the box, okay. So then we kind of start to look at some of these deeper causes, okay. So proxy conspiracism, the conspiracy theory is a proxy for something else. So the Pizzagate, it's not like if I took you to the pizzeria and go, look, nothing happening. You're going to, in that case, I guess I'll vote for Hillary. You were never going to vote for Hillary, right? These are people that hate Hillary. They hate the Democrats. They hate the Clintons. Wasn't there something about the body count back in the 90s when President Clinton, and some mysterious deaths about people that were affiliated with them, and something about that Whitewater thing, and they had that corrupt investment, and I don't like those. And the Democrats, those libtards, are a bunch of idiots anyway, trying to ruin our country. So, maybe the pizzeria thing isn't real, but they do bad things, right? It's a proxy for that. My other type specimen is the OJ trial, in which OJ was acquitted based on a conspiracy theory that the LAPD planted the bloody glove and they planted the blood splatter and so on. But if you look at the history, that was his defense teams. It worked. And if you look at the history of the African American community in Southern California, particularly LA, post World War II, the police did do stuff like that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So by the time you get to the trial, it's a kind of proxy truth for the jury, who surely a rational person looking at the evidence would go, yeah, he killed his wife, it's obvious. But not if you're looking at it in a bigger picture. And a little bit of, we're going to stick it to the system because they've been sticking it to us, right? So there's some of that, I think, in conspiracy theories. And then, of course, tribal, that anything our group believes, well, you just sort of go along with it. That's pretty normal, right? So there's a social element to conspiracism that would apply across the board to any social beliefs. This is what our tribe, our political party, our religion, and so on. Back to the resurrection. Did it really happen? I've had these debates with theists, and they insist, here's the arguments for the resurrection of that the tomb was empty, and after 3 days, and Mary Magdalene was there, and doubting Thomas afterwards stuck a finger in it. So, they have all these arguments. It's like, well, if these arguments are so good, why don't Jews believe it? If they understood the arguments, they'd be Christians. No. They understand the argument. These are not idiots, right? These are learned rabbis. They know your arguments. So there's something else going on. It has nothing to do with rationality and reason and evidence, right? It's just, you're a Christian, that's what you believe. If you didn't believe it, you shouldn't be a Christian, right? There's no point. You just be a Jew or Muslim or nothing, which would be my recommendation. Be a nun. But that's not that kind of belief. After the fact, when you say, okay, I'm a Christian, now let me see if I can find evidence to support. And motivated reasoning, hindsight bias, confirmation bias, my side bias, all those things kick in. And smart people, this is why I said why the rational believe the irrational, because they're really good at rationalizing beliefs they hold for non-smart, non-rational reasons, which are very common. So here, we might step back for a second and think about, how do you know anything is true? Mostly you don't. None of us do. So we kind of do trust our tribes, our institutions. So I publish Skeptic Magazine. We cover a lot of different topics, most of which I don't know that much about, and I edit the articles or whatever. So somebody sends me a climate article. Okay, here's a paper skeptical of global warming as human cause. Okay, what do I know? I'd read it, it makes sense to me. But what do I know? I don't know what it is. So I send it to my friends that do this for a living. They go, okay, here's why we don't accept it. Here's the 3 reasons, the 6 reasons, or here's how we know this is not true, here's how we know this is true, and consensus among climate scientists, and on and on and on and on. And I know he's probably right because there's this community of climate scientists, tens of thousands of them around the world working in different fields. They don't know each other. They don't meet on the weekends to get their stories straight so we can destroy capitalism and run the world. Right? No, they're just doing their little thing, right? And this person studies clouds, and this person studies glaciers, and this one studies CO2 gases, and that one studies sea level rise. They don't have nothing to do with each other. And they all converge to the same conclusion. So I, as an outsider, can reasonably think, yeah, that seems that they're probably right, provisionally true. And it's not an argument from faith, like I have faith in science. I've been accused of this. No, it's confidence that it works pretty well. They usually get it right. After some period of time of debate, disputation, steady state theory, Big Bang theory kind of combated each other for a few decades, and then it kind of sorted itself out. The Big Bang had all the evidence. The steady state theory had almost no evidence, and then pretty much 99% of cosmologists go, yeah, Big Bang, yes, steady state, probably not. And that, so then as an outsider, I go, yeah, okay, I'll accept that. Right? Because how would I know? I can't check this. Quantum physics, people send me articles about quantum physics and consciousness, or quantum physics and God, or pretty much you can use quantum physics for anything you want. And again, I just ask my quantum physics friends, what's the story with that? Oh, this is why we know that's not true, or blah, blah, blah. Here's how it works. Oh, okay. Not an argument from authority. Well, the smart guy I know at Caltech says no. That's not what I'm saying. I know the system works pretty well and that they've vetted each other, and that's why the institutions of science, journalism, fact-checking, of the legal system, and so on, they have all these checks and balances because none of us are omniscient. We can't know everything. Mostly we don't know much of anything. And I think there's this, with conspiracies, there's theories. There's a lot of this sort of, again, with the tribal proxy idea that I can't check. I just really don't know. I'm just a regular person, go to work every day, take my kids to school, keep gas in the tank, food in the fridge. This is all I can do, right? So I'm really dependent on these other people that do this, right? So for me, with the 2020 election, the moment that Trump's appointed Attorney General in charge of the entire Department of Justice, Bill Barr, lifelong Republican, voted for Trump twice, right? Total loyalist, says, we took the resources of the entire Department of Justice and we looked into all of the claims about election fraud and found none. I wanted to find them, I just couldn't find any. To me, end of story. That's it. I wouldn't even know who to call in Georgia. Like, all right, what about that video of the truck that came in at 2 a.m. and they were carrying boxes and it's kind of blurry and grainy. Can't quite make out. It looks like it says Biden on it. That they switched from Trump to. This is the kind of stories you hear. First of all, that's all bullshit because you can't see in these grainy videos anything. They're as good as the UFO videos, right? But I don't need to because I know that the system works pretty well. And that the people that are motivated to find something don't, that tells me, okay, that's a good proxy for what I should believe. And I think most people have no way to find out whether it's true or not. And if it doesn't really affect their life, then it's like they may just tell the poster, yeah, I think there's something to that. And that's how you get those elevated numbers of how many people could believe this seemingly incredibly crazy, ridiculous idea, right? Or like the 9/11 truth. I mean, it's still, massive numbers of people believe this. Mostly, again, political orientation, mostly liberals believe 9/11 was an inside job. Obama was not born in America. Apparently people forget Hawaii is part of the United States, but in any case, that's mostly conservatives. Okay, so, and even after Obama shows his short form birth certificate and the long form birth certificate, and then the guy in charge of Hawaii public health says, look, here it is. He was born here. We are a state. And so on, they still didn't change. It nudged very few people into the, oh, I see, I was so wrong. That experts on, so-called experts, everyone's an expert on Twitter for a week on each subject. Now it's an expert on Ukraine. Next week I'm an expert on COVID-19. It's like, so all of a sudden, he releases this long form and people are dissecting the PDF. And finally, somebody at Adobe, invented the system. Said, no. Here's how we know it's real. Blah, blah, blah. It's like end of story. Still, the percentages didn't budge much. So again, it has nothing to do with evidence, rationality, or anything like that. So the final one, this kind of constructive conspiracies, I mean, spend a fair amount of time in the book on this, is that there's kind of an evolutionary logic to connecting the dots into something nefarious going on behind the scenes, right? So this is my general idea of patternicity, the tendency to see meaningful patterns in random noise. My thought experiments, you're a hominin on the plains of Africa 3.5 million years ago, your name is Lucy, you stand about this tall, and you hear a rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator or is it just the wind? So there's type 1 and type 2 errors. It's a signal detection problem. So if you assume the rustle in the grass is a dangerous predator and it turns out it's just the wind, that's a type 1 error, false positive, but no harm. Not a big cost to make there. But if you assume the rustle in the grass is just the wind and it turns out it's a dangerous predator, your lunch. Congratulations, you've been given a Darwin Award for taking yourself out of the gene pool early, right? So signal detection is an interesting way to think about this. That if you picture a 2x2 grid here, so we have 4 cells. So here, let's say the conspiracy theory is true, and you say it is true. That's a hit. Here, the conspiracy theory is true, and you say, I don't think it's true. That's a type 2 error, a false negative. You missed. Oops, you missed out. That was a real conspiracy, and down here, the conspiracy theory is false. So you say it is true. That's a type 1 error. It's false positive, and then here you get it right, correct rejection. So you can apply this to anything. Really, it's a nice kind of heuristic to think about things that most people don't think about, the other boxes. I applied this once to this documentary film I was filmed for on cursed horror films. This is horror films like The Exorcist and so on, in which bad things happen to the actors, like during the filming or after and so on. So that's one cell, cursed horror films that were cursed. Okay, and they had a whole list of things to ask me about that. I said, well, what about the horror films that were not cursed, where nothing bad happened to the actors? And the producers are like, what? I said, yeah, there's plenty of them. And I listed them and they go, oh, right. And then how about films where bad things happen to the actors, but they're not horror films? Oh. And it's like, by the end, it's like, well, there's nothing to explain. Right. If you just consider all 4 cells. And so I apply that to conspiracy thinking, there are true conspiracies. We know this. So I rattle these off. Watergate, of course, Volkswagen conspiring to cheat the emission standards of the EU is another one. And there's hundreds of them, like just in the United States, the CIA, the MK Ultra program, which was to close the gap with the Russians and the Chinese and North Koreans of brainwashing and mind control. Just like the missile gap, they're going to have more of these ICBM missiles than we have, so we've got to close that gap. There was this belief that they, mainly during the Korean War, that they figured out how to brainwash people. The Manchurian Candidate, right? You could train people to assassinate foreign leaders. This was their goal. How can we do this? And so they actually had this program where agents were dosing U.S. citizens without their consent, without their knowledge, with LSD and other mind-altering drugs. This went on for decades. And at least one person died, this guy, Frank Olson, who was a CIA chemist who worked in the program. And they were at some conference together at a hotel, and his buddies dosed his drink with LSD, and then he kind of lost his mind and freaked out for days afterwards and ended up jumping out of a high-rise New York City hotel to his death. Or did he jump? Yeah, so this is a conspiracy theory. You can watch Earl Morris's film on Netflix called Wormwood. It's a multi-part series on this in which he kind of plays out the 2 end scenarios where he either jumps or he's pushed. And it's like, yeah, they did that. The CIA was involved in this. Like, what? Really? Our government? To U.S. citizens protected by the Constitution? Yes. Or Project COINTELPRO, so counterintelligence program by the FBI to plant secret agents into civil rights and social activist protest groups and so forth. Black Panthers, the American Indian Movement, feminist groups, and so on. I mean, many people in every meeting were agents working for the CIA. Not just spying to collect information about what the groups were planning to do, because some of them were violent. like some of the Black Panthers and so on. But also to do things to make the group look bad to the American public, so that they lose support. All the way up to blackmailing Martin Luther King Jr. By taping. I guess he wasn't the most high fidelity husband in the world, so he had trysts in hotel rooms, and the FBI recorded them. And then sent him a letter saying, we have tapes of you and your girlfriends, and we're going to make them public if you don't kill yourself. In so many words. And we have this letter. We've had this letter for a long time. No one knew this came all the way up from J. Edgar Hoover at the top of the FBI. All right, this is our government doing this, right? Or Operation Paperclip after the Second World War. There was a contest between the Russians and the Americans of who's going to get all those great Nazi scientists, chemists, physicists, biologists, and so on, working on chemical weapons, biological weapons, and nuclear weapons. We got to get them before the Russians get them. So, on the one hand, we're holding the Nuremberg trials to try and execute Nazi criminals for war crimes against humanity. And on the other side, we're taking some of the people that did the exact same things and giving them homes and jobs in America to work for us. Right? This is Operation Paperclip. Put a paperclip on the guy's file means he's going to Ohio instead of Nuremberg, right? Because he could help our side. It's like, okay, wait, we did this? Yes, yeah. And a lot of this came out in the 90s. We didn't know about this till the 1990s, when more files were released related to JFK's assassination. And this is how we found out about much of this stuff, was that, okay, what was really going on? It turns out it wasn't a conspiracy to assassinate Kennedy by the CIA or the FBI, but they were doing all these other things, right? So there's still this tranche of documents that everybody's been waiting for years now, like 50,000 documents related to JFK's assassination. And everybody thinks, the moment they release it, we're going to find out it was the CIA who killed him, the FBI or something. I'm pretty sure it's none of that. I'm pretty sure it's something else we were doing. Because we know that, we tried to assassinate Castro multiple times, and not just him, a lot of other foreign leaders. We rigged elections in South American countries. CIA did this to favor the fascist dictator over the communist dictator, because at least the fascist dictators are friendlier to American business interests, right? They won't nationalize our oil company like the communists will, right? So we got to help this guy either rig the election, help them assassinate the other guy, whatever. All this has been coming out. So whatever it is left, it's probably going to be something like that. Just embarrassing to the State Department now for our relationships with foreign countries and so on. It's probably something like that. And then if we think about, so now let's shift just for a moment to how do you know if it's signal detection, which box does it go in? You hear a conspiracy theory, how do you know? Right? So, part of it is we could just sort of set up a series of questions you might ask, like how big is the conspiracy theory? Right? If it's something very narrow, specific, we're trying to rig that election. We want to assassinate that guy. We want to, cheat the regulations here so we can make more money. Those are pretty realistic. Those kinds of things happen all the time. We catch people doing this all the time. That's what whistleblowers do. That's why we protect whistleblowers, because we know people do these sorts of things. But if you scale up, world domination. Bill Gates wants to control the entire world population by chipping people with a vaccine, right? He and George Soros are in on this. When people tell me this, why would they want to? Oh, so they can track you to know where you're going. I said, they already do this through your cell phone, right? You know this. You voluntarily, you paid to have this done. Oh, yeah. And it's not Bill Gates and George Soros, right? Anyway, that's kind of a funny aside. But the more people that would have to be involved, or the more elements that have to come together just right, the less likely the theory is to be true. Right, so if you take something, again, narrow and specific, just a couple people have to be in on it, and they only have to do a few things. That's not unrealistic. But even there, most conspiracies are difficult to pull off. Like Watergate, all they had to do was break into this Democratic headquarters and steal some files. And they couldn't even do that. We're talking, these are the FBI. These are Nixon's. He's the leader of the free world. He just has his operatives just go do this. They couldn't do it. Right? And that's normally how it goes. Right? So take 9/11 as an inside job. How would they do this? You'd have to have, we know how explosive the companies that demolition companies that demolish large buildings. They have hundreds of people working on these things for weeks and months. They have to break through the drywall, get to the beams in there, wrap them with explosive devices. You have to have the blueprint so you know exactly where the structural supports are, and then you have to set them all off with this sequence of explosions, and this goes on and on and on. You have to hundreds of people, thousands of elements would all have to be done just right. And somehow these operatives in the Bush administration did this without anybody noticing. In the World Trade Center building, it's like 50,000 people in each building every day. Oh, they went in under the pretense of elevator repair. It's like, elevator repair? But they'd have to be near walls that are nowhere near elevators. And so they have to spin and spin and spin the story to make it work. And again, not one person wants to go on national television and write a best-selling book about, I was there, I knew, or I dated the guy who was in on it, he told me all about it, my conscience is not clear, I have to tell you what happened. None. Or you take like WikiLeaks, Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, millions of highly classified documents, not one about 9/11 as an inside job. You'd expect there to be some memo, because these people have got to be paid, like here's the receipt we sent them. Something, nothing, right? And by the way, nothing about the fake moon landing, nothing about JFK, nothing about any of these kind of crazy conspiracy theories, but plenty of embarrassing stuff, like shooting civilians accidentally or on purpose in Iraq. That's pretty bad. Right? So this is one of the troubling things to me about these kind of far out conspiracy theories, is that they're distracting from the real stuff that goes on. Like how is it and why is it that the Saudi family members who were in the United States were able to take planes out on September 12th? How is that happened? And who funded the hijackers anyway? Why was that money coming from Saudi Arabia and their allies? What? And so it's like the normal kind of penetrative investigative journalism that should be going on is now being distracted by these other crazy theories, right? So I have a whole chapter on the assassination that led to the First World War of Archduke Franz Ferdinand sorry, I'm spacing out. On what? Sarajevo. Yeah, Sarajevo, yeah, sorry. Right, I mean that's kind of typically how it goes. It's a real conspiracy. In which a group of Serbian nationalists, the Black Hand, plotted to assassinate him ahead of time. They had the parade route, which was printed right in the newspaper, just like Kennedy's parade route was printed in the newspaper. You could see where he was going and so on. It's not that unusual. And you can look at the details of why they were angry about Austro-Hungary having too much political power over Serbia and Bosnia and so on. Okay. Fair enough, and then so there was like 6 or 7 of these guys, all young, and they were trained for it, and then they had to get their weapons like the day before, and each of them had to go to like a different house and give the little code word and get the, and one of them went to the wrong place, another one chickened out, decided to change his mind, and then, so they're there on the parade route where they're supposed to be, and one of them finally pulls the trigger on the hand grenade and throws it, and it bounces off Franz Ferdinand's car's convertible coupe, bounces off the trunk and rolls under the car behind him and explodes. And those people are injured and he drives off. End of story. All right? So then he goes and gives his little speech. Thanks a lot. I came here to see all you people and you try to shoot me. And then he decides, stupidly, let's go back and check on our comrades that were hurt because they're back at the hospital, which is on the other side of town on the same route. So they take the same route back, and then this guy, Gabriel Princip, one of the assassins, he was despondent, and he went to the deli and got a sandwich. He's sitting there, wallowing in his sorrow like this was a big screw-up, eating a sandwich, and just then the car rolls past him, and it makes a wrong turn up this one-way street, and the driver and the car has no reverse, so he has to put it in neutral and sort of coast gently backwards, where this Gabriel Princip is just standing like, oh, hello, bam, dead. It's like, that was it. 10 seconds either side, different road, anything. And then none of that would have happened. And then, the declaration of war by Austria-Hungary on Serbia, and then Germans had to respond, and the Russians had to respond, and the French had to respond, and the British had to respond, boom, 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 boom. None of that would have happened. So it's like, that's kind of typically, one, it is a real conspiracy. Two, how it really goes, right? People screw up, they're incompetent, chance, randomness, accidents happen, and that's it. And so it's another psychological factor that goes into belief. We have a hard time understanding randomness and chance. Most of what happens in life is random. But we're not well designed by evolution to see randomness, understand randomness. Lots of examples of this. Stars in the sky are random. But we see patterns of, scorpions and horses and fish and dippers big and small and so on. But that's what randomness is. My other favorite story is when Steve Jobs released the iPod. Shortly after that, they introduced the random shuffle feature, where it will play songs in your playlist randomly. And they got complaints from customers saying, they're not random. Certain songs come up more than others. That's randomness. If the songs came up perfectly evenly between each song, you'd have to program that in. And that's apparently what they did. Because people just can't. You ask people to flip a coin in their head. Heads or tails, and just write down what you think it would come out to be. They typically go like heads, tails, maybe heads, tails, maybe 3. In fact, randomness looks like clustering of 6, 7, 8 heads or tails in a row happens quite often. And you can, I think in a set of 100, you get at least 1 9 streak, either all heads or all tails. That doesn't feel random to the human mind, right? So much of what happens, stock market, politics, or so on, is just randomness. Just things are going up and they go down, sales go up, sales go down for no reason, right? But the human mind it's hard to see it that way, right? So athletes that have a really good season, and then they're featured on the cover of some big sports magazine in the United States, Sports Illustrated. And this was then called the Sports Illustrated curse. For years, they couldn't understand. Right after an athlete appears on the cover, he's a big star, he has a bad season, or his performance declines. And we said, what is the reason for this? So it's ego, or too much attention, or distraction from his sport by the media? No, it's just randomness. This is how your seasons go. Sometimes you have a mean, sometimes you're above the mean, sometimes you're below the mean. So the whole thing is called regression to the mean. And this happens across the board. Hollywood producers, are usually, they have a big successful film, and they, this is it, he's hit his stride and so on, and he had a flop, he's lost his mojo. No, just some films are up, some are down, up and down, right? That's randomness. And so pretty much most conspiracy theories are attempt to squelch all randomness. So again, the kind of conspiracy principle, never attribute to malice, what can be explained by randomness or stupidity or incompetence, right? So much of that is what happens, but it's just hard to see that. And, so I was going to... please. So I opened the book actually with this quote from a QAnon YouTube video, one of the big QAnon proponents. Have you ever wondered why we go to war? Or why you never seem to be able to get out of debt? Why there's poverty, division, and crime? What if I told you there was a reason for it all? What if I told you it was done on purpose? Right? So, it's like, yes, I would like to know why there's wars and poverty and so on. And this is what social scientists do. They have, whole departments of people that study statistics and so on. And they have these regression equations and analysis of variance. And they debate about, to what extent did you properly control for poverty in this thing you're studying over here or whatever. It's just a tangled rat's nest of causal interaction. But what if it's none of that? It's like, it's that guy right there. It's George Soros. He's behind the scenes and he's doing all this to us. So first of all, it reduces the complexity and the chaos. It's like, and it makes you feel like, now I understand. I'm in control, right? Less anxious about the uncertainty of it all. Just think about that. Scarier than 12 guys in London called the Illuminati running the economy and doing a crappy job of it, is that nobody's running the economy. Nobody really quite understands it. There's entire economics departments that disagree with each other. You have the Chicago School of Economics, the Austrian School of Economics, the Keynesian School of Economics. What? Because it's not like physics, right? It's way more complex. But, so the idea is, well, what if it's none of that? You don't have to worry about that. It's just this one thing over here. It's comforting. It's easier to understand. It's more entertaining. There's actually a little bit of research done recently on the entertainment value of conspiracy theories, right? They're like a good Hollywood movie. And so if you think about, I don't know if you saw Oliver Stone's JFK, but it's a great film. It is so flawed. He's just filled with lies and errors and mistakes, and on, and I could go on and on about this. There's whole web pages dedicated to like the 1,000 things he got wrong in this film. But it's a great film. I mean, it's just the acting is good, the cinematography, the editing is. By the end, you go, something will happen. I just know something was up there, even though pretty much everybody in the world was in on this thing by the time he's done. And so it's entertaining. That's part of it as well, right? So anyway, in the end, I think conspiracy theories are highly believable because enough of them are true that it pays to err on that side. They're entertaining, they're comforting, they explain a lot of things. And so I think we'll always have them with us. I think it's a problem for the rationality community to say, well, okay, we acknowledge some of them are real, but how can we tell? So let's apply the tools of science and rationality, figure out which ones are true. Here's some algorithms, questions we can use to apply to that. And that's what I try to do here. All right, thank you.